So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. My name is Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, and I'm the founder of Middle East Insights platform. Our platform is a volunteer-driven platform which has participants, members, volunteers from South Asia, from Middle East, from Europe, and from different parts of the world. So, the entire idea today of this session is to talk about Syria's Druze. Specifically in the South Asian context, we don't know much about the Druze identity, who the Druze are, why are they important. So, this lecture is very essential. The whole title is Syria's Druze Seeking a Place in a Changing Nation, Navigating Pressures from the Government and Israel. So, as you all know, yesterday there was some kind of negotiation between Turkey and Israel on Syria, but it did not yield any kind of result. So, for that, and talking specifically about Druze history, we have a very proclaimed, acclaimed speaker with us. And we are genuinely very, very empowered for the privilege of his time. His brief introduction is as follows. Said Abou Zaki sir is a dedicated scholar and educator specializing in Arab and Middle Eastern history, Islamic studies and cultural thought. With over 15 years of university teaching experience, he currently serves as an instructor at Lebanese American University, where he teaches courses on Lebanese and Arab history, cultural studies, and ethics. He has also taught at American University of Beirut, Phoenicia University, and Institut Français du Proche-Orient. It was French. I'm sorry to the French for not pronouncing it properly. Mr. Abou Zaki holds a master's degree in Arab and Middle Eastern history from American University of Beirut and is a PhD scholar in history at St. Joseph University. His research focuses on the socio-religious history of Druze community with multiple peer-reviewed publications in the field. I would request all of you to go to his LinkedIn page also, because a 3-part series of his interview has been published, and it is very detailed. I actually took notes from it. So he also has a background in macroeconomic research and editorial writing along with his academic work. In December 2024, Mr. Abou Zaki published a groundbreaking bilingual article titled The Religious Attitude of the Druze Towards Violence, a study based on oral sources, in the Druze Studies Journal, offering a rare and insightful analysis of Druze ethical and political thought grounded in community testimony and primary sources on the history of Lebanon. The article received exceptional reception worldwide after only 4 months of its publication. He is fluent in Arabic and English. He brings a nuanced and deeply contextualized perspective to discussions of Druze identity, political affairs, religious influence, particularly in the context of Syria's evolving landscape. So with this, sir, thank you so much for endowing your presence to us. And
You're welcome.
And the first simple question is, so that our audience who come from different age brackets and different kinds of scholarship do understand, is that who are the Druze?
First of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in this forum. The Druze is a community, Islamic community, that took form or acquired a unique religious identity in the 11th century during the reign of the 6th Caliph Imam al-Hakim Amrillah, a Fatimid Imam in Cairo. They took a unique religious identity by taking a step away from Ismaili tradition. So they religiously belong to a Fatimid, the Fatimid religious tradition, and then after what happened is that they stopped at recognizing the Imams at the 6th Caliph, Hakim B'Amrillah. So afterwards, it became a closed community, and the religious tradition became an inherited tradition. One generation bequeathed it to another generation up to these days. Now, the Fatimid tradition in the classical age, the 1st century, differs from other traditions in the way. The main difference is in the way they approach the revealed text, the Quran. So what they apply in interpreting the text is rational interpretation, which is rational interpretation is one of the methods to interpret any text, not just a revealed text. But that can be contrasted to what mainstream Muslims use, which is literal interpretation. And once you apply these two methods, you would have different understanding of revelation and thus different understanding of religion, of worship, of faith, of so many things. I always explain to my students in class when I talk about the early Islamic period, the rise of Islam, it's that the method of interpretation is somehow like a lens that a person wears. It either focuses your vision on the truth of a text or it diverts it away from the text. So it matters a lot what lens you use in terms of whether you will be able to understand a revealed text or not. Specifically, we are talking now a revealed text because the context is religious, but in general, any text. So, and the Druze, of course, belong to this tradition, the rational interpretation of revelation. Now, but what we call now the Druze are the communities that remained after this period, the formative period, the 11th century, in the Levant. So mainly in Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, and Jordan. Now, in terms of number, the biggest community, the Druze community, is in Syria. Then next, Lebanon, then Palestine, then Jordan. Now, that happened like 10 centuries ago. Throughout these 10 centuries, of course, they had developed their own customs, their own social, political traditions that are easier to study because we have signs of them or traces of them in sources and in literature. So now we have this community in Lebanon, and it played a major role in the history of Lebanon. And we have it in Syria, where now the focus is because of the political change in Syria. And in Syria, we have Druze in several places. We have a small group in the north, what they call the interior of Idlib, or the mountains of Idlib. Previously, it was Halab. It was Aleppo. And most Druze would claim their origin from there. But now they are a minority there. Then in Syria, we also have in the Golan Heights. And today they call it Rif Dimashq, or the villages adjacent to Damascus. It's a province. But the historical name of it is Acclaimed al-Ballan, which is this is a mountain. You have here Lebanon, and there is a Druze community in Rashaya, and here you have Acclaimed al-Ballan, but it's in Syria. So and then you have in Hawran, which is Suwaida, currently called Muhafazat Suwaida. This is in the south, and it's at the borders of Jordan. Acclaimed al-Ballan and Golan Heights are at the borders with Lebanon and Palestine. And then in Hawran. In Lebanon, we have also several communities. We have in Mount Lebanon, and we have in a region traditionally called Wadi Taim, divided into two districts, Rashaya, Hasbaya. And then we have in Palestine, which is northern Palestine, or the state of Israel now, we have in also two places, the upper Galil, I think, and Mount Carmel. But in Mount Carmel, I think there are just two villages. The most of the community is in the Galil, northern Galil. So this is the geographic distribution.
Thank you, sir. One thing which I found out during my research is that because Druze do not identify themselves either as Muslims or Christians, they have imbibed a lot of traditions from Buddhism, from Hinduism, like reincarnation.
Okay, let me explain the first part.
Yeah.
The first part is what matters to the identity.
Yeah.
The problem in whether Druze are considered Muslims or not is not with the Druze, it's with the Muslims. In this region, there were before the 20th century, there were always a dominating empire, Muslim empire, since the rise of Islam, of course. And what usually happened is the ruling family, the ruling dynasty, has its religious preference, its religious identity. Let's say if it's Sunni Hanafi, then Sunni Hanafi division would be the prominent one. Now, what happened through history is that, of course, Sunni Islam became mainstream Islam, the biggest part of Islam. And not just that, most of the caliphates and sultanates were Sunnis. And thus, with time, it became synonymous with Islam. So if you are Muslim, you are Sunni, which is not very accurate. Islam has many divisions throughout history, has many branches, and all of them identify as Muslims for a single reason, very simple reason, is that their religious beliefs are based on the revealed text called the Quran. Now, how they differ is how they interpret that text. And this is not a simple difference, but I'm saying that once you belong to the same religious tradition, it's difficult to say they don't belong. But that's the problem when later, when they started also become the Sunnis become more exclusive. So if you don't believe in so and so and do so and so, you are not Muslim. That's their judgment. And in this sense, we understand why there is this controversy whether the Druze are Muslims or not. But historically, we cannot evade that fact that Druze rose from the Fatimid Caliphate, which is a Islamic caliphate, and they also branched from the Fatimid Islamic tradition, which is an Islamic tradition. Now, a proof of that, what I'm saying, is that if you go to the archival material, for example, of the Ottoman Empire in Lebanon, which is my field of expertise, you go to the court, for example, archives, or to the population count, or you would find these classes. For Sunnis, they call Islam. So these are the Muslims only. Then for Shia, they call Matawli. That's a name for the Shiites of Lebanon. And the Druze. Now, when they want to count Christian communities, because there are many Christian communities in Lebanon, and Muslim communities, they would count all these three. Muslims meaning Sunnis, Matawli, and Druze. But the point is, see how the term is used. So only a Muslim is a Sunni is a Muslim. That's the decision of the state. And it became like sort of a fact. You call Shiites in Lebanon Matawli, you call Sunnis Muslim, and you call Druze in that name. Now, is a tradition of Russian intervention inspired by Mu'tazili school of thought. I have a question. Do I take the question?
Yeah.
Now or okay.
We'll take the question as it is a conversation. Anurag is asking that is the tradition of rational interpretation of Quran inspired by Mu'tazilite school of thought, which was dominant during the Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad and synonymous with the intellectual Islamic Golden Age?
No, not in the not necessarily in the Fatimid tradition, because the Shiite tradition applies in its early phase, generally applies rational interpretation. And not necessarily in the Mu'tazili. In the classical thought, in the classical period of Fatimid, meaning the 10th century, they have they don't identify with the Mu'tazilis, and they criticize some of their beliefs. For example, the fourth caliph, Al-Mu'izz li Dinillah, in one of his books, he has a clear criticism of Mu'tazili thought. But even the rational interpretation of the Fatimids, it's somehow different from the rational interpretation applied by Mu'tazilis. The definition of rational interpretation also requires explanation. I wrote an article in Arabic about it, not about interpretation, about rationality, but there is a section on interpretation. The main difference between literal interpretation and rational interpretation is not whether you use your mind or not. Possibly in all kinds of interpretation, you need to use your mind. The main difference is the cognitive capacity you use in understanding the terms of the Quran. So in a literal interpretation, when you read a mountain, you visualize a mountain. That's a mountain. It's the rock or this thing you see through your senses. So the cognitive capacity you use is your five senses to bring a meaning. In rational interpretation, it's different. A mountain is no more a mountain. The mind would study the function of a mountain and try to deduce an understanding that is not sensual. A simpler example in the Quran, for example, water. Okay, we pour down water to rise life. Water here in the Quran does not mean water. But if I apply literal interpretation and thus I use my five senses, what is familiar to my five senses about water is the water I drink, the substance the liquid I drink. But once I take that this is necessary for survival of a living thing, of a living being, and then I go to the rational interpretation. So yeah, there is a living being, the soul, which is non-material, and thus you exclude water, H2O. So what brings to the rational soul life is knowledge, and thus here water becomes true knowledge. That's rational interpretation contrasted with literal interpretation. So the sun might become, in literal interpretation, the sun is a sun, the one you see in the sky. In the Fatimid tradition, the sun is the imam. Why? They have the same function. The sun brings light, so you can see. The imam brings knowledge, so you can reason, and so on. More to give you deeper understanding of this, there is a prophetic saying about that towards the end of time, the sun would rise from the west. So that's like the signs of time. Now, this is a prophetic hadith, not a Quranic verse. The Fatimid tradition understood this to mean the rise of the Fatimid imams from concealment to public sphere from Morocco, because Morocco to the Arabs is the West, Al-Maghrib. Till now, it's called Maghrib al-Arabi. So the fact that the Fatimid Caliphate and Imamate went from concealment to public work from the West, they write that this prophecy of the Prophet of Islam materialized in the formation, establishing of the Fatimid Caliphate, where the Imam, who's resembled by the son, became public after centuries of concealment. So these are examples of the difference between literal and rational tradition in the Fatimid religious tradition, and you don't see this in Mu'tazili at all. You don't see this in Mu'tazili.
No, thank you for making us understand A, the context, and B, also the difference.
Yeah.
And I think it is going to stay with all of us who are going to,
Okay.
whenever we are going to look at something or understand something, we are going to think about it.
Yes.
That is very important.
Yeah.
And coming to
the cognitive tool.
Yeah, the cognitive tool. And coming to the modern
to
history.
your question,
Yeah.
to your question about whether there is Hindu and Buddhist influence, not necessary. To say that these ideas, whatever the ideas, came from the East, but for sure, the Caliphate, the Islamic Caliphate, expanded and reached to the borders of India, and there were cultural interaction between and religious interaction between Muslims, generally speaking, and Indians. Of course, we had many of these cultural exchange. The first astronomical treatise to be translated to Arabic was an Indian treaty called Siddhanta, and it became famous in Arabic Sindh around 773 in Baghdad. It was translated and became the foundation of Muslim Arab astronomy. The first mathematical books were translated also from Sanskrit and also Indian. And probably we have we have a famous Arab Muslim scholar called Al-Bayruni, who also translated one of the Hindu religious texts to Arabic, and it's the oldest Arabic translation. Today also, we have an Arabic translation of the story of the Buddha, which is an old translation that I think is no more found in the Indian culture. This story, this version of the story, which is Balawhar wa Budasif in Arabic, the name, it was a critical edition was published by my university, USG, 40 years ago, and then it was republished again recently by one of my colleagues. It's a fascinating book about the maybe mythical story of the Buddha, not necessarily the one famous in India. So this interaction is there, but when it comes to the Fatimid tradition, there's no necessity for studying this interaction, because in their tradition there is explanation for most of the ideas, especially in the way of interpreting. The reincarnation thing is more about the property of the soul, or the nature of the soul, and this is something that starts from what is approved by most religions, at least in this region. Christianity, Islam in general, and Christian also in the broad terms, that the soul is immortal. The soul has a beginning but doesn't have an end. And without this conception, there's no way for heaven or hell, because there should be something that remains for eternity, whether in blessing or in suffering. Now, how they understand this continuation differs, of course. Reincarnation is about understanding this continuity that, for example, let me explain how Plato would argue for that. And this is Greek culture, not Indian culture. In his Republic and other dialogues, he argued that the soul cannot function without a physical tool that is the human body. And thus, that's why it's necessary for it, whenever it loses a tool, which is a body, to acquire a new one. Because it, by its nature, continues to live, but to function, it requires what? A body. So it's to go back to the original argument or the original statement that the idea of reincarnation has to do with an acceptable concept that the soul has a beginning but has no end, and there is a way in which it should exist. Now, in Islam, the mainstream Islam, they think that when a human being dies, he is buried. There is a like intermediary phase, barzakh, and then at the end of time there is this resurrection, meaning the same old bodies are reformed and would live again. Now, this is one way to think of how the soul would continue, but then what happens is unclear. What happens between death and the end of time is not that clear. And the other way is to think that it continuously exists. But for example, in what is known here about reincarnation is it does not align with, for example, the cycles in Hinduism that at one point in time there is no more existence. It will just return to the origin, and this is not part of the known tradition about reincarnation.
But it happens rarely. One has to have a certain kind, like moksha or nirvana, whatever you attain, that the
I know that
breakage from life.
The one who would have to stop the cycle of reincarnation in the Buddhist tradition is the one who would reach this higher consciousness and purification, and which is not common, right?
I have no idea if it is, but the point is that it is so. The entire idea of the meaning of life and the cycles of life and the entire going back to, the Almighty or the Paramatma that we call it, is very interesting. But I am quite agnostic.
Mm.
And so I look at it in a certain kind of different way of how the structure of life or hierarchy of life continues more in the socio-economic lens than the spiritual lens. But at the same time, what is very fascinating is the idea of what you have mentioned is understanding the truth of the text.
Yes.
Understanding the truth of the text, do you think that there is...
this is the crux of it. This is the beginning. You either have a proper beginning or it is the opposite. How you interpret the text, exactly.
Yeah. And so Anurag is asking the question, and he's going to be very happy because it's the first time that all his questions are being answered. Okay. So did the cultural exchange with India continue during the Fatimid dynasty when ships from Red Sea ports would sail to southern coastline of India as well as Sri Lanka and vice versa?
Okay. I'll give you a historical fact. Fatimid Da'is, missionaries, were trained to work undercover, even beyond the Islamic world. And thus they reached out to India and China. And there were Fatimid communities in India during the time of the fourth caliph, Mu'izz Dinillah. And one of the stories in the book called Majalis al-Musayrat, that like the minutes of the courts of Mu'izz Dinillah, talks about Fatimid partisans, Indians, coming all the way from India to Tunisia, where the capital of the Fatimid Caliphate, to arbitrate in the court of the Caliph, their Imam, about the problem. So you don't need to think of ships and trade. The link was there, and due to the missionaries, there were Indian missionaries and Indian Fatimid Muslims at that time. And of course, if you have that connection with a community, of course, you have access to the culture.
Yes.
And the Fatimids were keen to use, like in India, they would use missionaries who are well versed in Sanskrit, can talk the language of the people, can explain the doctrine in the language of the people, and they are versed in their culture. So it's not hard to say. I can confidently say that cultural exchange was there, happening. What I was arguing is that the Fatimid tradition didn't need this exchange to bring about its ideas, because rational interpretation of the Quranic text is enough.
Yeah.
And that's something else.
Yeah. So with this, I would, we have taken double the amount of time that we requested from you. And one thing which I want to tell everyone, so when I was making the poster, in the introduction of Sir, I wrote that he has, expertise in Druze thought. And then he corrected me and he said Druze history. And I sat back and I thought about the meaning of the two words. And then I realized that we are going to have a lovely talk today.
Okay.
That was something, it was a very, very simple suggestion, but a very deep suggestion. And this podcast will be available in two parts. One will be only on the Druze history.
Okay.
And second will be on Syrian Druze.
Okay.
And I would request all of you to please find him on LinkedIn. It's very easy. Just type his name and you can see him. The same photo in the, like not the same photo, but you can see his image in the LinkedIn profile page. And do go through the 3 articles that interview pieces that were recently published. They are in Arabic, but they can be translated.
One of them is in both.
In both.
The most recent is bilingual. It's available English, Arabic.
Yeah. Okay. So because the one that was on valid jumlat, starting with that.
No, the one on Druze attitude towards violence, a study based on oral sources. This is bilingual.
Okay. So
it begins with an Arabic, the original Arabic text, and the translation we prepared for it follows.
Okay. Yeah, because my website translates immediately. So that is, so I don't know if it was. The meaning is lost.
Yeah. From my experience, all AI translations of religious texts from Arabic is not cannot be that faithful and strong, because Arabic language is so deep and philosophical, by the way.
Yes.
Very philosophical. There is a common theme in cultures, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, even in the Confucius, Chinese, Taoist and Confucian thought, in Greek culture, and in Islam, of course, and monotheist religion in our region. Coming back to the origin, we will talk about the nirvana, coming back to the origin. For example, this coming back to the origin in Arabic language has like more than 10, 15 words in the Quran. All of them are authentic Arabic words that are used in diverse meanings that have the same common meaning, coming back home. The most common about or most known term that, but no one would think about it in this way, is a tawbah, repentance in English, right? In Arabic, repentance is tawbah, and tawbah is going back home. That's literal meaning of it. And of course, it should ring a bell in Hindu thought, Buddhist thought, right? That's a theme in the Bhagavad Gita. That's a theme in the Buddhist tradition. In Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, I find it everywhere. Now they have a lot of words. Even some of the names of the prophets can be translated the one who comes back home. So
no, I agree
and
with
of
you.
Course, an AI translator won't catch any of these.
No, I agree. I had a very difficult experience with translation today from English to Hindi, in fact. So I agree with what you're saying. And but again, something is better than nothing. So in that way of thought, I would request all of you to find him on LinkedIn. Anurag, you can keep texting him questions. He will respond to you, I'm pretty sure. So read those 3 links that are there on his profile. And because every answer that he gives like every question that he gives answer to is a very detailed, like he names all the spiritual leaders, goes to the history of many accounts. And like, I did take notes today when I was going through it. So, but apart from that, thank you so much, sir.